Good morning, everyone. This is Carolina Weather Authority's meteorologist Joshua Nagelberg. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. Let's talk about what's going to soon be Hurricane Zeta in the Northwest Caribbean and its threat to the Yucatan Peninsula as well as the Central Gulf Coast here in the next few days. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Invite your friends to do so as well, and appreciate your comments. Let's keep everything on topic if we can. Also, we have our Facebook page, facebook.com, CarolinaWXAuthority.com, talking about local weather here in the Carolinas, as well as our website, which also has links to our long-range outlook, latest videos, so the ones you're seeing here on YouTube, as well as some of our models so that you can follow along. All right, so the biggest changes we've made to our forecasts over the weekend, since when I put out my video on Saturday, the system had just started to become not just an invest, but what was likely to be a depression and then a storm. Now we've seen it spend a couple of days over the Northwest Caribbean and have an idea of what the structure is going to be like, how it's going to be steered. And not too surprisingly, it looks like it's going to be another overachiever here over the next couple of days. So we have now kind of seen more agreement in the forecast models kind of honing in on where this storm is going to go over the next few days and potentially how strong it could be. So right now, the call for Zeta is to make landfall this evening over the Yucatan, very close to Cozumel and in between Tulum and Cancun, which is an area that's just gotten battered all month with storms. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. And as a hurricane, probably a Category 1, but possibly even a low-end Category 2. And then maybe a brief period of weakening, but then looks like favorable conditions tomorrow evening, tomorrow night, and first thing Wednesday, maybe for another round of strengthening over the southern Gulf before the storm makes a right turn and aims towards the central Gulf Coast, meaning southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and southern Alabama, with effects maybe as far east as Destin, Florida. So right now, the cone of uncertainty has tightened up. We've seen more model agreement versus this time yesterday when there was still an extreme amount of uncertainty anywhere from northeast Texas to, central panhandle of Florida. Now we're seeing that zone tightening up as the storm has begun moving. It was kind of stalled and kind of relocating its center. Now we're seeing it moving. So now we've got a moving storm. We've got a lot more agreement in the models, which is a good thing. Of course, not a good thing as we're agreeing on where it's going. And looks like right now the most intense winds for the United States are going to be confined to areas south and east of New Orleans. So basically the coastal parishes of southeast Louisiana. Same goes though for coastal Mississippi and Alabama. This is pretty much the dead center of the central Gulf Coast, and a spot that gets hit a lot, and unfortunately going to be the deal here again in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Intensity-wise, there's still a range of solutions, anywhere from high-end tropical storm to probably at the very worst a high-end Category 2 hurricane. If there is any relief, it's that we believe the system will weaken a little bit as it's making landfall. It's possible we could have two landfalls in the U.S., one over Louisiana and the other either in Mississippi or far southwestern Alabama, depending on how much of a right turn it makes. Because remember, there's parts of Louisiana, so Lafourche and Plaquemines Parish Plaquemine Parish that actually stick out into the water, and then there's some barrier islands and a sound here, and then the possibility that a second landfall could occur if it takes the track we're expecting. So we'll have more updates on that coming up for you guys. Feel free, though, to stop by our Facebook page so that you can get more on what we're seeing short term. I'll also post some updates to the community page here on my YouTube channel, so please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're in the Carolinas, please visit KC Auto Repair for a $19.99 oil change. That's about as good a deal as you're going to get here. And in the Carolinas, we are going to see more rain out of this. It was pretty miserable yesterday with heavy rain across the central and eastern part of the state. Looks like the next batch of rain will be coming in with Zeta and the upcoming storm system that is steering it. And most of that rain is going to fall during the day Thursday and into Thursday night. The good news is that things should improve in time for Halloween, and actually it should be dry and cooling off as soon as Friday evening. All right. Water temperatures over the Gulf of Mexico have cooled, but we still have enough heat potential here in the south central Gulf for strengthening. When we start to reach the blues, we start to see less favorable conditions for strengthening, and probably cooling waters up here would lead to some weakening. But as the storm is accelerating, it's not going to have a lot of time to fall apart. We saw this during Delta just a couple of weeks ago. All right, so I do want to talk about the Yucatan, because look at all of this. We've got some very favorable conditions, and, October and the Yucatan Peninsula certainly go together as far as tropical season goes. We still have quite a bit of warm water just off the Yucatan, between the Yucatan and the Caymans and Jamaica. So a lot of favorable conditions here in the next 24 hours for strengthening right up to landfall. The Yucatan is under a hurricane warning. We've seen this before, actually twice this month. This was Tropical Storm Gamma, which was almost a hurricane coming onshore near Tulum, just to the south of Cozumel. And we had a hurricane warning as it was very close to hurricane strength just a few weeks ago. And then 4 days after that, we had another hurricane warning as Hurricane Delta, which was a 4, then weakened to a 2, came by just north of Cozumel and made landfall just south of Cancun. And of course, that one ended up striking Louisiana later. And now we have a very familiar spot being once again under a hurricane warning with Zeta, including Cozumel, Tulum, all the way across to areas that are still underwater from all the flooding that we've had here over the last couple of days. So some pretty crazy stuff going on here with our track. But it looks very familiar to these residents of Quintana Roo State in northeastern Yucatan. And you can see the Hurricane Center has a 70-mile-per-hour storm likely to become a hurricane here later this morning or early this afternoon, and strengthening probably right up to landfall near Cozumel and to the north of Tulum and south of Cancun, and then holding on to hurricane intensity all the way up to landfall Wednesday afternoon or evening. The rest of the tropics do look a little quieter. The remains of Epsilon have moved on and merged with a storm system here. The front that came through the Carolinas yesterday is offshore, should not develop. And at the tail end of it, in a spot that it's kind of holding its own, is Zeta. It's managed to avoid all the dry air in the Gulf of Mexico by remaining fairly stalled over the weekend and finally start to make a bit of a northwesterly track towards the Yucatan. By the way, and I'll zoom in on this a little bit more, you see this band of heavy rain and thunderstorms coming across the central Caribbean towards Jamaica. Man, it's been really bad in Jamaica. We've had some serious flooding, even loss of life with all the rain from the formation of Zeta, and now on the eastern side, we still have a very active pattern with thunderstorms spreading northward through Jamaica. Some more major floods expected there, unfortunately, right on into the upcoming week. And oh, by the way, 2 waves we're going to watch coming into the Caribbean may get sucked up into this general gyre, which means more rain for Jamaica. We could have kind of a record amount of rain over just a 3 or 4 week period in Jamaica, maybe even in the Caymans as well. So if you're watching from Jamaica, you know, I wish you guys the best, but I know it's pretty rough over there. Here is a zoom in of the storm. You can see the center is starting to locate under the strongest thunderstorms, and this is a sign of intensification. You can see it a little bit better here on the infrared loop, where thunderstorms are certainly holding strong here in the center, and I would not be shocked if we had an eye forming somewhere in here near the coastline later tonight, and especially once we get into the Gulf tomorrow. But the storm is definitely organizing. It's intensifying. I wouldn't say rapidly, but certainly steadily. And now that it's moving and still being protected from the wind shear and dry air to the north, it's got a shot at developing further, and we think that will continue over the next couple of days. All the models show strengthening with just about everybody going hurricane intensity. Category 1 seems to be the favored strength, but I will show you some global models that are showing stronger, and a trend that we're monitoring closely. Aircraft flew into Zeta earlier today. They saw that it was finally moving west-northwest right towards the south end of Cozumel. The pressure has dropped off to 992, and more importantly, winds have strengthened and expanded, especially on the right side of the storm. So we are probably nearing hurricane intensity at this point. The steering flow right now is fairly weak, but we're starting to see this high-pressure region over the southern Gulf spread eastward, and that is going to steer Zeta on a more west-northwest and then northwest path right into the southern Gulf, and then this trough dropping down through the Four Corners region should steer it around the high and off to the north and east fairly quickly once we get to Thursday. Here's Epsilon on the way out, by the way, just in case you were wondering. This is the steering in the lower levels, and we're seeing now the steering in the upper levels take over, as a few days ago we were dealing with the lower level steering. But right now, not a whole lot of wind shear to worry about. In fact, when we see blues in here, we see low wind shear, so that's why we're having a strengthening storm. That is further shown here by the SIMS, NESDIS, showing an area of green with very low wind shear in here. There's more wind shear in the Gulf, but is expected to weaken once this high that's over Mexico spreads northeast. We're going to take this yellow and green region and shift it northeast right over Zeta, so it definitely has a window where it will strengthen probably right up until Wednesday morning, and then should level off and weaken once it gets into the cooler water off the Louisiana coastline. Spaghetti plots are in pretty good agreement. This will be reaching Louisiana and maybe Mississippi and Alabama after a first strike, but all the model guidance now going over southeast Louisiana. Most of the models nearer to the east of New Orleans now. A look at the ensembles from the GFS shows several solutions going right at southern Louisiana. Some are pretty intense as a hurricane, by the way. I'll show you that. With the most intense solutions going right through Plaquemine Parish and probably aimed right at Pascagoula and Mobile. Then a look at the European. It was actually farther west yesterday, starting to shift rightward. It is farther west, but some of these solutions with a stronger storm do show more of a hard right turn, by the way. So a weaker solution would be to the west, which is better news for southwest Louisiana, while a stronger solution would be farther off to the east with one outlier going into Florida. But I think that one is pretty unlikely to occur. The GFS parallel shows the pressure dropping right after landfall into the low 970s, and a landfall probably as a Category 2 Wednesday night, and then weakening quickly as it moves into Alabama, Georgia, and into the western Carolinas. The GFS operational is now on board with that solution as well. It's not quite as strong, but does show a storm getting into the 970s, so maybe a high-end Category 1 hurricane, and then weakening quickly after it moves inland. But this would be a lot of rain for southeastern Louisiana and southern Mississippi. And then a look at the upper level pattern as far as the dry air in the oranges and browns. We can see that this storm, because it slowed down over the weekend, now is less likely to be impacted by that dry air wrapping into it until it looks like very close to landfall. And that's why the GFS is now going with a stronger storm. It's keeping most of that dry air out of the center until it makes landfall and then gets picked up by this system in Oklahoma, which, oh, by the way, is producing snow and ice. Yes, so we have snow, ice, and a hurricane all on the map at the same time. Pretty crazy stuff, but welcome to fall. Finally, a look at the steering flow. We look for these stronger winds that create wind shear, and the wind shear is still pretty low until Wednesday morning, and then starts to pick up closer to landfall as this system kicks eastward. And it should weaken very close to landfall, but maybe not as much as you would think. The European model as well has come in stronger with a strengthening storm over the southern Gulf of Mexico here tomorrow night into Wednesday morning, and pressures dropping all the way up until about landfall here. And this solution has a slower landfall and a farther west point, maybe over towards Houma and Thibodaux, but then weakening quickly near New Orleans and moving inland. But this could be bad for New Orleans, especially with the rain, maybe not so much the wind. Look at the tropical model, shows the H-Wurf making landfall just south of Cozumel and north of Tulum, weakening and then re-strengthening over the southern Gulf of Mexico with a well-defined eye, and holding its strength with a 972 millibar, and then finally weakening a little bit into the 980s with landfall, looks like over Lafourche Parish, and then spreading northward towards Gulfport and past Christian, Mississippi. And finally, I'll show you the HMON model. And that has a similar track, although a little bit farther south into Mexico tonight, making landfall just north of Tulum, and avoiding Cancun and Cozumel with the very worst of it. So it will show weakening, and then we go back into the Gulf with strengthening as the pressures are dropping back into the 980s. Although this system is not going to be as strong with this track on the HMON because it's farther south, and then it tends to lose more steam over the Yucatan. But a similar landfall spot near Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes, tracking over New Orleans but weakening very quickly, with most of the strong winds staying over the coastal zones here, not over New Orleans. I do think this area is going to be under hurricane watch here later today, and that means action should be taken in the typically flood-prone areas. And I will show you the rainfall forecast from NCEP, showing 3 to 4 inch potential right near the landfall spot from Houma, New Orleans, Slidell, up into maybe Hattiesburg and Laurel, Mississippi, Meridian, up to Birmingham, and then very heavy rain possibly in the Georgia mountains, as well as into western parts of North Carolina. We could see 2, 3, 4 inches of rain, excuse me, maybe a little bit of severe weather and localized flash flooding in this region before the storm gets kicked out of here. So again, I'll show you our official forecast, and we're going with strengthening through landfall, maybe a bit of a reprieve in that, and then more strengthening starting tomorrow afternoon or evening over the southern Gulf, probably reaching its peak in here and then weakening slowly up to landfall Wednesday evening, and then quickly weakening into a remnant low by Thursday and expanding quickly off into the western Carolina mountains into the mid-Atlantic states and moving out by Friday morning. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon. God bless.